Good evening and welcome to our Tuesday night officiating Zoomcast. My name is Scott Zelkin. I am the manager of the Junior Officiating Development Program for USA Hockey. And I'll be your host this evening as we talk about one of USA Hockey's most important initiatives, the Declaration of Player Safety, Fair Play, and Respect. This is an initiative that USA Hockey introduced to the world about a year ago at this point in time, and as we turn the page and begin to head into fall with hockey being back everywhere and a lot of areas getting back on the ice, with hopefully a few more joining in the not too distant future, we thought this was an important topic to cover right now. Guests or joining me in this Zoomcast are three key individuals within the organization that were instrumental and are instrumental in the genesis of this program, as well as the education and the implementation. Our first panelist here is an individual coming to us from Northern Vermont who, in addition to being a coach and an official, is one of our key volunteers. He's a vice president in USA Hockey and the chairman of our youth council, Keith Barrett. Keith, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the offer.
Our second panelist is a former player at the Division I collegiate level, as well as a former coach at the Division I collegiate level, and now our director of youth hockey on staff here at USA Hockey, Kenny Rausch. Kenny, thanks for jumping on tonight.
Thanks, Scott. Happy to be here.
No, great. And then our third panelist is our director of the officiating education program, Matt. And Matt is going to, bring the officiating perspective as well as I might be able to offer that. And then Keith and Kenny are going to be able to kind of offer their perspective from the player side as well as the administrator side. And as we always do, I want to first off recognize our viewers here watching on the Zoom webinar. We're going to invite you to certainly submit some questions as we go through and offer our comments. And then we also have a second group of people watching on YouTube Live. That group of people, unfortunately, are not going to be able to offer questions, but certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. And as we start with all of these, the first thing we want to do is start with a few poll questions. So we will we'll launch some polling. We'll take 2 or 3 minutes here to get your feelings on a few questions here. So first question, how confident are you that you understand all objectives and goals of USA Hockey's Declaration of Player Safety, Fair Play, and Respect? Very confident, somewhat unconfident, or very unconfident? Second question is, what is the Declaration of Player Safety aiming to address? The third question is really a practical question in terms of how many times last year, for those of you that are officials, did you assess a bench minor penalty for banging the boards with their stick after a big hit with the design to intimidate an opponent? And then last season, what did you think about how well a job or how good of a job the officials in the local area implemented the declaration? And then finally, do you feel the coaches out there and the hockey people out there had a good handle or a good understanding on what the declaration was aiming to accomplish? And the votes are coming in. We'll give it about 30 more seconds and we'll close it out and we'll share those results and then we'll get going with the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to put this up on the screen and you guys everybody can see on this. So the first question is, how confident are you as somebody watching out there in our audience with the objectives and the goals of the declaration? About 50-50. The good news here is none of you are unconfident or don't feel confident at all about the declaration. So that's good. What does the declaration aim to address? The majority was all of the above, which is late and avoidable contact, head contact, checking from behind, and unsportsmanlike conduct. So that's an overwhelming majority of there. How many times did you guys give bench minor penalties for banging the boards? almost nobody in the audience gave out more than 2 during the season. Last year, how much or how well do you think the officials in your area offered up their or were able to enforce the declaration? So the majority was somewhat agree versus strongly agree, but overall we were on the positive side of that. And then how firm of an understanding do you think the coaches had in terms of the declaration? It's kind of a mixed bag with this one, with the majority saying somewhat agree, but we still had a decent amount with disagree, strongly disagree, and strongly agree. So with that, as we do in most of these, we're going to jump into a PowerPoint presentation and talk about the declaration, and then we're going to watch some video at the end, and we'll be able to kind of work with our panelists here and talk about this. So when we talk about the declaration, and I'll start with Keith and Kenny, let's talk about the what, whys, and how. So Keith, when we talk about the genesis of this and how did we come about, or how did the organization come about to wanting to implement this? Can you give us a little bit of background here?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really over a number of years that at the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 tournaments, national tournaments, we had seen, I think, the level of, big hits, blow-up hits, not really taking, the puck. It's more or less, let's take the body. And, that whole finish your check, sort of culture was hanging around. And, when the big blow-up hit would happen, it was usually followed by some, cheering from the bench of the team that maybe delivered the check, with some banging of the sticks. And it just kind of, raised the whole level of chippiness of the game and, the antagonistic taunting basis. So that was one aspect of it. I think at the same time, Scott, the Mayo Clinic came out with a report, as well as some of the other medical journals across the country. And it really showed that body contact, and particularly head contact, that should not occur in 15-year-olds and under age bracket. So the Youth Council really started digging into it and saying, here's the science, here's what's going on at these national tournaments. And if it's happening at the national tournaments, obviously it's going on throughout the whole year in the different districts and affiliates. Let's look into it and see if we could move away from this antagonistic, taunting, mouthiness on the ice, and more towards skill development, player development, and make the game safer. So Dave Klasnick, who was the vice president of Youth Council at the time, put a small committee together. Matt Leaf was on the committee, Kenny Rausch was on the committee, myself, and a number of other critical players within the hockey organization. And we looked at the current playing rules, because it was not a rule change year. So, we couldn't start writing new rules to put in the book in between cycles. So Matt dug in on his side, and we just started peeling back the onion on some of the existing rules and how we could sort of interpret them a little better and sort of, bring them to light for the coaches, for the administrators, for the players, and for the officials all to buy in on. And really that was the formation of what we know as the Declaration as we see it today. So that's kind of the foundation of where it's at.
No, that's great. Kenny, is there anything you want to add here in terms of, Keith gave us a really good synopsis and give us some history, but anything you want to add from from where you're sitting? You were a part of that committee as well.
Yeah, Keith nailed it right there. He basically said everything that the committee came up with. Just the two little things that I would play off on, as well as the skill development side of it. With the American development model, we're trying to make our players, bigger, faster, stronger, more skilled, more hockey sense, and those kind of things. And what we found with the culture that was existing right now at some of the tournaments and national tournaments is that players, coaches, and parents were celebrating the wrong things, right? They're celebrating the hits instead of playmaking and scoring goals, and the banging on the boards just changed the focus of the game from playing hockey to just escalating the temper of the game, and sometimes not getting so much out of control, but forgetting why we're there, right? To make pretty plays and score some goals. And the second thing we have to remember is youth hockey is not the National Hockey League. We have different rules. It's not entertainment for people, right? It's a development system trying to make kids better people, better hockey players. So what we're watching in the playoffs right now, those are different rules than are played by youth hockey players. So we needed to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, so really get away from that blow up hit and focus more on skill, having fun, all the things that USA Hockey's been really celebrated and rewarded for within the ADM, right?
Yeah, getting rid of the intent to punish and intimidate players, and instead just play a good, clean, physical game. We want the game physical and hard. We just don't want violent and stupidness where kids are getting hurt, laying on the ice, and having potential brain injuries for the rest of their lives. That's not why we signed up for hockey.
No, for sure. And Matt, so we've talked about the what and the why. Talk a little bit about the how. How is USA Hockey and how are we implementing this, and what have we been doing to try and get this out to the masses at this point?
Yeah, it started with the subcommittee in the spring, I guess, of 2019, putting together the document, putting together the principles and the concepts that philosophies that went into the Declaration of Player Safety, Fair Play, and Respect. That was fine-tuned right up until the Saturday morning in June when it was presented to our board of directors for adoption and implementation. And there was very little discussion. The organization was, in all facets of it, to the board of directors, I think it was a unanimous vote to adopt and to move forward. And that really put us in a position over the summer to start developing educational materials, resources. We put together pulling video clips from a variety of different levels. And one of the challenges that we always have is having relatively quality, high quality, good angle clips from youth hockey games. So we spent some time going through national tournament archives, videos. We used some from the International Ice Hockey Federation, some from our junior showcase in August, and really put together a package of videos that supported the documentation and gave examples of what is both acceptable and unacceptable actions as it related to the body contact, competitive contact, and body checking. You saw those go into the educational materials for officials and coaches last fall. There was a fairly significant social media push through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook through USA Hockey and on our website. There was additional material throughout the season that went out, some interpretations and specifically trying to address the spirit and the intent of the banging the boards rule. And keep in mind, there were no real rule changes to here. As Keith indicated, it was really just creating an awareness and an expectation as it related to proper enforcement of the existing rules, not only from the officiating side and the enforcement, but also from the coaching side and teaching skills and holding players accountable and establishing expectations to play the game the right way. And that process hasn't stopped going into this season. You're going to see a continued push again and an emphasis, and that's why we're here tonight, is to really launch the re-emphasis and let everyone know within the organization that we understand that change, and especially a culture change, takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but USA Hockey as an organization is fully committed to these principles and look forward to making additional progress this current season.
No, that's great. So, okay, so now we've got a little bit of the background on everything. Let's talk a little bit more nuts and bolts. And Kenny kind of spoke to this already, but this is a culture change, right, Kenny? This is really what we're looking to do. And even Keith mentioned what they were seeing at national tournaments. It used to be, and I'm sure, Kenny, when you were playing, or Keith, as you were coaching years ago, it was finish your check to soften the opponent up, right?
Absolutely.
Physical games, soften them up. And now what are we looking to go towards?
Yeah, now what we're looking at, especially again at the youth level, playing under different rules where, we don't want to put kids at harm's way or risk for injury, but we want to play hard. But, it went from the checking for soften your opponent up or to intimidate or punish to get a psychological advantage or a physical advantage, to separating the opponent from the puck, which is the actual intent of body checking. Now with the intent of body checking, even at the high levels, really, you look at it, it's with the purpose of winning the puck back, right? It's not necessarily to separate the man from his head, separate the man from the puck. It's about winning possession of the puck.
For sure. And Keith, when we first started talking about this and talking about the culture change, was there a lot of pushback from an administrative side? Did you run into any challenges on that end of things?
I would say that there was a petition about the banging the boards. They took it way too far. They were thinking, well, when you score a goal and you bang the boards, so you're going to get a penalty. And as Matt indicated, it was more intended for what's happening on the bench and making the coach responsible, making the players responsible for those actions. And there was a online petition. The typical curmudgeons who think the game should never ever change. And while we don't want the spirit of the game to change, we have to change the game. And it's like the dinosaurs. They couldn't adapt, so they're gone. We're not dinosaurs. We need to keep this change going. So from the administrative side, I'd say not. I'd say that once we got the word out there and we wanted what was expected, and I think the critical element for me, anyways, as administrator, was having every facet here, meaning the player, the coach, the administrator, as well as the official, all have skin in the game. And we're all responsible for each one of these elements to keep these kids safe and to keep our game moving forward.
Yeah, it's truly. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to jump in with one other thing that Keith talked about at the very beginning was, the studies that some of the medical communities came up with, the Mayo Clinic and the American Academy of Pediatrics. All of a sudden they're on Capitol Hill in Congress talking about youth sports and youth football and potentially them being the pushers of change of rules for their sports, where we wanted to get ahead of the curve and not let someone else dictate to us, hey, this is what you have to do. So we took a deeper dive into it and say, hey, how can we stay ahead of the curve with safety, with skill development, with the ADM? And this was one of those other ways we could get there.
That's a critical element, Scott, what Kenny just raised. And it's important that we as an organization, that we as a national governing body stay ahead of that, because if not, we are going to be dictated to by people outside of our organization who don't know our game, who don't know, all the little nuances of our game. And we're going to be strapped to it. So it's better that we take the opportunity with the personnel that we have on staff, the experts, the Matt Leafs, the Kenny Rausches, and the many other dedicated staff members that we have, as well as our volunteers, to create this environment that's going to be safe and that we could prove to, legislators and people in Washington that we know what the hell we're doing and we're going to do it right.
No, that's really good. So let's so we got that. So now, what is part of that culture change, right? No late hits, no hits to the head, and no checking from behind. And I'm going to throw it to you, Matt, in a second here to kind of talk about that. But this is what we identified, right? Kenny, these are the areas when we talk about the blow up hits. We aren't trying to take checking out of the game. We're not trying to prevent body contact. We're just trying to do it in the right manner, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like we said, these are not new rules, right? These are just things that we've somehow come to, I don't want to say accept in a game, but we know they happen, but that doesn't make it right. So this is just another way for us to emphasize what the right, correct way for kids to play. Again, like I said, we want it physical. We want kids to play hard, but we don't want the heat-seeking missiles just out to hurt someone.
Yeah. Okay. And Matt, how are we educating our officials, and what are we telling officials to look for in terms of these sorts of things?
Yeah, I think first of all, everyone is pretty much common sense at this point that the hits to the head and the no checking from behind are both extremely dangerous actions that really have no place in our game and put players at risk unnecessarily. So everyone was pretty much in agreement with that, and that's not a real big issue or a change. Where the change really comes in is in 1997, we implemented a rule in regard that pertained to the late avoidable body check. And the enforcement of that was very spotty right from the start. No one really bought onto it because the culture was, dump, bump, and leave a lump. The intimidation tactics, the punishment, with no possible realistic chance of gaining possession or winning possession of the puck. It was like, okay, well, I have no chance to get the puck here, so I'm just going to go on and hit the opponent as hard as I possibly can. So next time, maybe he or she will hear my footsteps or my skating coming in, and he'll be more apt to cough up the puck. And that's just not the way that we need the game to be played. So a big change in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here is to create the awareness about the late avoidable check. And if we're putting the emphasis on the purpose of gaining possession of the puck or winning the puck back, okay, it pretty much says that, well, if the opponent doesn't have the puck, then there's really no reason to be hitting that opponent. So that's a big part of this. And I think it also really kind of sort of put a greater emphasis, which we did in 2013, on the charging and the boarding as well. Because those two particular actions are taking advantage of that player who was vulnerable and defenseless. If you see the document, if you review the document on the Declaration of Player Safety, there's several different areas where we talk about the check that's delivered to an opponent who's considered to be vulnerable or defenseless, meaning that either they don't have the puck or they're in a really critical situation where if you deliver that blow-up check, the chances of the risk of them getting injured are much greater with no chance of gaining or winning possession of that puck. So that really was a big part of the awareness that wanted to create, is setting a tight standard and putting together, and we really looked at it from the video clips. You'll notice that everything was identified either as acceptable or unacceptable. So when the player went in and created that competitive contact or delivered that body check with the focus on winning possession of the puck, that's considered acceptable. That's what we're striving for. That's the positive that we really want to emphasize in how the game is played. And for those actions where you take liberties with that opponent who's vulnerable, defenseless, there's no opportunity to gain possession of the puck. There is no effort to win possession of the puck. And the sole purpose is that intimidation or the punishment, that becomes the unacceptable actions, and really trying to draw attention to those dangerous actions and eliminate them or as much as we possibly can from the game. So a lot of it was rewording some of the language that of the current rules, not necessarily changing the rules and or the what is expected, but really kind of sort of creating an awareness, modernizing some of that language to make it more practical to what the game looks like, or we want it to look like in 2019, 2020, and then creating an awareness and an emphasis on the proper enforcement based on some of that terminology.
Yeah, Keith, Scott, can I jump in for a quick second there as well? Like Matt said, it kind of adjusting some of the language and such. And one of the things that we've talked about and also emphasized is having the player who is delivering a body check or body contact, their stick should be below the knees and on the ice, because that is the first point of contact that we are looking for to try to win that puck. Without that action, if your stick is in the air and your hands are up, obviously there's no attempt to play the puck or win the puck. So, and again, we've had some questions about open ice hits. So that would be the answer there, is if you're not attempting to play the puck at all and you deliver an open ice check with your stick in the air or your hands up, that would be a penalty, right? But if you're delivering that check and it's stick on stick, no matter where you are on the ice, that's a legal play.
No, for sure. And I think as we continue on, and it's a really good question from the audience in terms of the open ice hit, because, a lot of focus sometimes is along the wall, but the open ice hit is just as big of a deal. And from an officiating standpoint, what are we looking for from an enforcement, right? we're looking for those vulnerable players. Was the player able to defend himself, or is he completely oblivious? And we've got a couple of videos we're going to show here in a little bit. If the player's vulnerable, this goes back to what Kenny was talking about and Keith a while ago in terms of we're not trying to celebrate the blow-up hit. We're not trying to be missiles. We still want, this isn't the National Hockey League. This is youth hockey, meant to be fun, meant to be safe, meant to be something that everybody can enjoy. So we want to protect those vulnerable players. We want to eliminate hits that are designed to punish. If the only purpose is to punish a player, right, Matt, we're putting our arms in the air. And then as Kenny just said, are the players hands up, or is he or she leading with their stick? And if they're not doing those things as an official, from an educating and official standpoint, those are the things that are really going to set us off, right? Anything I missed there from any of our panelists?
Yeah, Scott, if I can just add one thing too, is to keep in mind that the definition of a clean body check, it has always been using the trunk of the body delivered to the trunk of the body, which is below the shoulders and basically above the knees. And usually basically taking that hip and in that trunk. Well, part of this whole premise too is that if the stick's down, okay, the stick's down on the ice and the focus is stick on puck or stick on stick to win possession of the puck, that's automatically bringing your arms down. It's automatically bringing the stick down. So the contact that's going to occur in that particular situation is going to be trunk of the body to trunk of the body. And that's what we're focusing on. But if the stick's not on the ice and the stick is up, okay, the chances are very, very good that player is leading and delivering that check with the stick or with the arms and with the arms extended. And that is not a legal play. That's not a legal body check. And that never has been. However, that was kind of sort of pretty much an acceptable practice for a long time, even though the rule was always very specific under the roughing rule that you can't lead with your arms. And obviously the high sticking comes into play as well. But if the stick's down, the chances of that contact occurring being trunk of the body to the trunk of the body are greatly enhanced. And that's what that's part of that focus as well.
Right. And so those are a lot of cues that our officials out there watching can be looking for as we educate our officials as well.
Correct.
So now let's talk about, I might say from where I was sitting last year as a level 2 official, working here locally, in addition to my role with USA Hockey, one of the biggest, I call it misnomers or concerns, was the old banging the boards with the stick. And everybody's alluded to it so far. What are we doing here? What's the message? And I was really comforted to see in the poll questions, we didn't have a bunch of officials that have been handing out 5, 10 bench minors for banging the boards and banging the stick. But what was the purpose behind that? Why are we doing that, or what are we trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, if I can take the lead on that one, Scott, and I know that Kenny and Keith will clean this up for me as well. Keep in mind, the language in regards to banging the stick has been in the rule book for many decades. It's under 601, and it has been there. And the spirit and the intent of that always was, and still is, okay, when it's done for the purpose of taunting the opponent or in some way intimidating the opponent. It's never been meant, and it's been there for a long time, to cause a team, to prevent them from celebrating a positive thing that happens, or whether it's gaining possession, winning possession of the puck and creating a 2-on-1 scoring opportunity, scoring a goal, and those types of things. So that never was the intent. And immediately after the declaration went out and the petition started and people were upset about it and stuff like that, the officiating program sent out an interpretation that went out to every single official. I'm fairly certain it went out to every member of USA Hockey. It's still posted on our website, and we're going to continue to emphasize this. But it in essence, it says the spirit and the intent of this rule is to eliminate unsportsmanlike behavior that is designed to taunt or intimidate an opponent through the celebration of an unnecessary or illegal body check. Simply banging a stick or other object against the boards while on the player's bench is not a penalty. However, if it is deemed to be unsportsmanlike conduct and should be penalized when done as a means of escalating dangerous or unnecessary physical play where there is no intent to legally gain possession of the puck. That's what we're trying to accomplish with this. Obviously, as we go through the next rule change process, we'll be able to clean up the language in the rule and emphasize that any further. But I want to emphasize again that the spirit and the intent of this is the taunting, the unsportsmanlike behavior that tends to escalate. And Keith mentioned this right off the bat. When you deliver a big illegal check and the bench goes wild, okay, all that does is escalate additional dangerous actions and illegal play, and the game doesn't go in a positive direction from that point. So that's what we're trying to nip in the bud with this language and what we're trying to accomplish as part of the declaration.
Keith, anything you want to add?
Not much to clean up on that one. Matt hit it pretty good.
The other thing I would say that, Matt, you did a fantastic job there. And just as an example, like we said, about celebrating the wrong things, like what we would be seeing is a team losing 5-1 in the middle of the third period. The team that's down 5-1 delivers a huge hit, doesn't affect the scoreboard, doesn't help them get back in the game. Cheering from the bench happens, the banging of the boards. It escalates to the stands. So now what happens to the other team? They want to get revenge, even though they're up 5-1. And we just saw things starting to get out of hand when it didn't need to.
No, you're right. And that's exactly what, what we're worried about in there. And so, this is a trick question. We've already addressed it. What rules were changed as part of the declaration? Well, none of these, and we're not going to beat the old dead horse here, but we've talked about this all along. All we've been doing is emphasizing, and all we're looking to do is emphasize rules that are already on the book. From an officiating standpoint, though, okay, so communication with teams. How can officials handle situations that have the potential to get out of control? And Keith, I'm going to ask you to put your coach's hat on here for a second, but and you've been on both sides in the coaches and then on the dark side with the officials. But when you think about this, we can all sense when games are starting to escalate. There might be that big hit, and even a penalty might be called. What do you want to see out of officials in terms of communication with the bench or things like that?
Communication with the bench in these situations is probably the most important aspect of the game. And I say that for not only from the coach's side, but I sit in a very unique position. I was a coach, I was a player, I was an official, I'm an administrator, I was a parent. So I hit all five of them. And as far as the communication goes with the coach, it's important because everybody will say, the refs lost control of the game. We don't have control of the game. We don't control the game. Everything we do on the ice is reactionary. There's a penalty, we make the call. So for us to be sort of in front of it, we have to go to the people that are responsible for controlling the game. And to me, that's the coach. From a coach's standpoint, when I put my coach's hat on, that was my responsibility. My responsibility was to talk to my players, calm them down, keep them in check, so to speak, and focused on the game, and not, sort of amp them up to the point where now they're banging their sticks, that whole thing starts rising, and the next thing you know, we have these big blow-up hits. So I usually go from an official's, now put my official's hat on, I usually will go to the coach when I feel, because officials can feel this on the ice, that the game is starting to rise in chippiness, and I'll say to the coach, let's try to bring them down a little bit. Let's not let this thing get out of hand. So I think it's vitally important that the refs recognize it and talk to the coaches, and the coaches they'll listen, they'll respond. And if they don't, then you see where the problem is, and then of course you have to take other means that are in the book.
Yep. And we did as one of our first Zoom casts a couple of months ago was on communication with teams. And the message you just gave, Keith, is the exact same message we got from an American Hockey League head coach, a youth coach at the Tier 1 level up in Boulder. Is communication is the most important part. And Matt, I'm going to say this, and if you want to clean up anything that I'm going to say, feel free to jump in. But going over and showing the coach on the ice that you are aware of your surroundings, that you are aware of what's going on, and you're drawing that proverbial line in the sand, but you're doing it in almost a collaborative manner that is, hey, can you help me out? I don't want to have to do this, but we're going to have to rein things back in, is going to have a lot more in terms of results than just standing there and putting your arm up in the air constantly. You've got to be able to make that communication, right?
Yes, Scott, absolutely. I think that is a key point, and Keith certainly hit on a valid emphasis and point on that as well. Look, the bottom line is officials are the enforcement part in this deal. The officials don't necessarily make the rules. We are not the legislative body, but we are the ones with integrity. We're the ones that have skin in the game, but our skin in the game is for fairness, for safety, and it is for providing a competitive environment for those teams to be able to go out and play the sport they love. And then it becomes an enforcement angle. So one of those steps is to consistently enforce the rules. And if we establish what the standard is and are able to effectively communicate that standard throughout the game, when the time comes where you need to have that talk with the coach and to de-escalate the situation a little bit and bring them in as a partner, we have to have the skill set to effectively communicate. And from a partnership standpoint and for the best interest of the game, versus turning it into a referee who is going to call penalties versus the coach who may or may not rein his or her team in and or control his team at that point, it is a very effective or very important skill set. And the best officials have that ability to be able to recognize the situation, be aware of their surroundings, as you indicated, and effectively communicate, not in a threatening way, but in a way that engages and de-escalates the situation. And then the coach can assist you in helping with the players as well.
Kenny, you present this all the time as part of the AGM group and to different local people. And I already mentioned this a little bit, but is there anything you want to add? Who has the ultimate responsibility for the team's behavior?
Yeah, there's a presentation on the Declaration of Player Safety in our new coaching education curriculum, and this is one of the things we talk about. When it comes down to the ultimate responsibility for the team's behavior, it starts with the coach and the players, obviously. And as a coaching education part of it, we like to say, what you permit, you promote. So if we're not teaching the right things, it's our fault as coaches, right? So there could be a situation where, a referee misses a call. We know it happens, and he could miss a call on the positive side for your team, where one of your players commits an infraction that should have been a penalty, like a checking penalty or a boarding or whatever it may be, and the ref didn't call it. Do we as coaches turn a blind eye and say, hey, way to go, we got away with one? Or does that player come back to the bench and we say, hey, that's not acceptable. That's not the way we play the game. It's an unacceptable play. You're putting someone at risk, for injury, and it's just not the right way to play. So, yeah, we are responsible as coaches to set the right tone. And then, of course, the players are responsible as well to play the game the right way.
Yeah, and that's just it. And, officials, sometimes officials feel that responsibility, but ultimately everything does derive from the coach, and the officials have to enforce the rules when so called on. Let's go to the tape. Let's look at a couple of examples here and see what we can come up with, and see if we can look at a couple of examples. So.
Well, assuming we're talking about that second hit there in the corner,
Yes.
To me, obviously the puck is already gone, right? So there's no attempt to play a puck. So if there's no attempt to play a puck, it should be a penalty right away. But not only that, he launches himself into the player in the dark, launches himself into the player in the white. And that's obviously a check delivered to intimidate or punish. That's not a attempt to win the puck right there.
For
So
sure.
that would be an unacceptable. So for me, that's an unacceptable action.
Yeah, and I think we all agree with that. And from an officiating standpoint, obviously we can see Mr. Referee, in the Mr. Referee in the corner there, he does not have his arm up in the air. And that's because if we go back and we're going to do just a little more teaching, and in a couple of weeks, we're doing a Zoomcast on 3-man positioning for the referee. But if you watch the referee as he's trailing into the zone, he's not moving his feet. He doesn't have a very good sight line, and he's not skating, and he's looking through everybody. So it becomes a very challenging play for our referee to see. So now we had a question earlier about an open ice hit. Let's take a look at this one. And Keith, I think this is gonna fit into what you talked about in terms of some of the things you might be seeing in national tournaments.
Lumberjacks clear. Schmaggy back in his own zone. Tape to tape for Bollinger. Got it to center, but then lost control. It's brought back in. Bollinger knocked down. Berger shot. Carrier the save. Bollinger still down on the ice. Puck cleared out to center. And we're going to have a Jacks clear. Schmaggy back in his own zone. Tape to tape for Bollinger. Got it to center, but then lost control. It's brought back in. Bollinger knocked down.
Keith, anything you wanna add here?
Yeah, no possession of puck. Player was absolutely in a vulnerable position, and the other player targeted his head. I mean, if you didn't see it, he absolutely dropped his shoulder and targeted his head. So, three no-nos in my book.
Yeah, and Matt, from an officiating standpoint, at all levels of hockey, it's a 5-minute major and a game misconduct, if not a match penalty, correct?
Agreed, yes.
Okay, so now our next one, and we've been using this in some of our officiating education program virtual seminars. So you may see this in some other places as well, but let's take a look at this one.
Oh yeah, my favorite.
So my suspicion, and we'll play it one more time. My suspicion is that a few years ago, everybody would think that's a legal hit because he's just finishing his check.
Yeah, you're right. A couple of years ago, that might have been okay. In the National Hockey League, that's probably okay. But in youth hockey, it's certainly not. Like I said, the puck is clearly gone from the player's stick. And a wise referee once told me, you can't finish what you haven't started. Right. So if the definition of a body check is an attempt to win the puck, if a player doesn't have a puck, he can't be checked like that or checked, period.
Exactly. And that and the whole game of hockey, and you could even talk at the international level and everything else there, there's really a move towards late hits, vulnerable players. This, once again, it's not open ice, but it checks a whole lot of boxes in terms of plays that shouldn't be allowed. Matt, for our officials in the audience, what are we looking at for a penalty on this play?
Yeah, I think that's obviously a boarding, and the main reason for that is the opponent, the player in dark, was vulnerable and defenseless, and it was pretty clear that he used the boards as a means to punish the opponent with excessive force, and threw him dangerously into the boards. So I think boarding is the logical one there, probably 2 and 10 for sure, and if the end result was an injury, and we're not going to know that with a 9-second clip, then obviously the major plus the game misconduct would apply.
Perfect. Okay, next one here. You get to make the call in the audience again. What do we think about this one, panelists? We'll watch it here.
Once again, a lot of boxes checked there. If you watch closely, the player gave up the puck or basically forwarded it to a teammate roughly 10 feet inside the blue line, somewhere in that range. His head's down, he's vulnerable, he's defenseless, and a good solid 10 to 12 feet outside the blue line, the player in white decides to deliver that check, a late hit. So we don't have an ideal camera angle on that one. It certainly fits under the late avoidable check. Totally unnecessary. So roughing for sure. And then based on the contact or what the end result is with the boards, certainly the potential for a boarding penalty as well.
Perfect. Keith, anything you want to add there, or you think we covered it?
No, I think you covered it, Scott. It's And that's what we're trying to prevent. That's what this is. That's what this whole declaration is about. It's just cleaning that stupid stuff up. That's all.
Okay, so now let's go to the World Championships from a couple of years ago. And we'll go back and let's see what we see here. Kenny, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll take this one. You see Jack Eichel, the intent right there is clearly to win the puck, and he does win the puck. And if you paused it right there, you would see the very first point of contact is stick on puck or stick on stick, which is what we're looking for, right? So some people say like right there, that's when the body contact happens and the puck is already won. So he's already gone stick on stick, first point of contact, and then the body follows into it. So it's a great clip by Jack, and obviously the U.S. team wins this puck and is headed out of the zone. But this is also a really good clip too, because as you see Jack's arm comes up a little bit after the contact, that's really the only difference what changes this play from competitive body contact to a body check is that overt action of his arm. Because if Jack's arm doesn't come up at all, this is clean body contact. This is that would be allowable at 10 years old, at 12 years old. But because his arm raises up a little bit, that changes it from body contact to a body check. So a penalty at 10, but certainly legal and acceptable at 13 and 14 years old.
Oh, exactly. And this is the one we put in because we really wanted to, we wanted to be able to show, a good hit. This is the kind of hit we're looking for. And certainly there can be hits that are more physical than that. It's not the most physical hit in the world. But when you talk about checking all those boxes, all the boxes that we want to see checked are really kind of ticked off there in terms of stick down, torso, shoulder to torso, or torso to torso. The player's not vulnerable, all of those things.
Yeah, and had he checked him a little harder into the boards, it's still an acceptable play. We're not saying you can't check someone hard, right? That would be a perfectly legal play. And this is some of the things for the coaches that are watching here as well is why we want body contact to be taught as early as 6 years old, right? We want it to be taught at 6, 7, and 8 years old, body contact confidence, starting with angling and mirroring at 10 and stick on puck, and then continue on stick on puck at 11 and 12 years old, and allow them to check in practice, because we know 96% of injuries happen in games. You're not typically going to injure your teammate delivering a body check in practice. So now by the time they're 13, they've had 6 years of working with body contact and potentially body checking. So you don't need that 1 hour body checking clinic before starting 14U hockey. You've had 6 years of training potentially.
No, you're absolutely right. That's really good information. So I'm going to open it up to a few questions here. Keith, one of the questions we've gotten is, what direction is the organization going to take with the declaration moving forward? Do you see any big changes in the distant future or in the near future? What do you see as hockey's back? So as we move forward, what are you seeing in the future?
I don't think there's any big changes. As we were able to pull this off, in an off-cycle years where there's no rule changes. And if we just, keep that in mind, that we just keep these rules that we have in our game fresh, and like Matt said, change some language so it's more, understandable or interpreted more wisely, I think is the direction we're going. There was a lot of rumors going around, I think just before we jumped into the declaration committee, and they're going to take checking out. It was during the winter Congress, winter meeting down in Orlando. And, we were getting hammered because everybody said there's a big move to get checking out of the game. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I think it's part of our game, has to be part of our game, as Kenny indicated earlier in a lot of things the ADM's talking about. So, but what came out of it was the declaration. And I don't think there's a big movement afoot to take checking out of our game. But I think with the skill development, player development, moving in that direction and respect, we haven't really talked that respect angle that's part of this declaration. And it's really, it's being a good human citizen. It's no different than what we're facing in society every day today when you turn the news on. And it's what respect we have, for our coaches, our players, our officials, parents, administrators. If everybody has the equal respect, and that's part of the declaration, then we won't get those mouthy, comments to the ref as he's taking the kid to the box, or maybe a coach would, not mouth off as much, trying to demonstrate to his team that, hey, I have control over these refs. If I just mouth off a little bit, intimidate them, they won't make the call next time. Those days are gone. As a ref, we need to just look through all that stuff and say, coach, we're going to work together on this because it's a youth game. 4-letter word, game.
Yeah. No, great. Matt, Robert writes in, one of his questions is, would when it comes to banging the stick, are we including actions like that designed to incite, even if it's not after a big hit? What about banging the boards designed to incite just in general? How are we looking at those things?
Yeah, I think, again, we have to look at it and understand the situation and understand the circumstances that are involved and know our surroundings. We talked about that earlier. But a big part of that is if it's done for taunting purposes, okay, or if it's done in an unsportsmanlike conduct manner, okay? And look, the officials, we have enough feel for what's going on out there in terms of the player that gets body checked or gets knocked down right in front of the bench, and all the players lean over and they start, taunting him, or they start trash talking and those types of things. And in that process, that player reacts, and then they start banging their sticks or kicking the boards or whatever. That's an unsportsmanlike type situation. That's taunting. And that was the spirit and the intent of that language in the rule book right from the start. A team goes out and makes a great play. A kid blocks a shot. A player goes out and makes a great pass and sends a kid in on a breakaway, and he goes in to score the game-winning goal, or the goal that puts him ahead with 3 minutes left. That's not taunting, okay? That's celebration. That's emotion. But being able to distinguish and be able to determine or identify the difference between emotion, okay, and the difference between the taunting or the unsportsmanlike behavior. And that's what the good officials are able to do. But if it falls into that category of taunting or unsportsmanlike, then yes, it needs to be penalized. If it's just an emotional response to something good that happened to that team, then let's play on and let's move on and have a great hockey game.
Great. And so we know Kenny, and on the player side and the coaches side, they're continuing to educate as they get into their coaching seminars and in their program. What is the officiating education program doing this year? Because now we're into the second year of this initiative. What are we doing with our seminars to make sure that this is something that stays in the consciousness of our officials?
Well, it's part of the online seminar curriculum. It's one of the mandatory modules that every single official has to watch. Deals with the declaration of player safety, fair play, and respect. So that's part of it. In our virtual seminars, a good portion or a good chunk of those seminars are dedicated to video clips similar to what you've seen tonight. And the key points and the talking points that are involved with those video clips all relate back, or the vast majority of them relate back to the emphasis that we're looking for under the declaration. So it's an ongoing process. It's a continuing process. You'll see the next issue of Stripes is going to focus on the declaration again. We have a full page on the USA Hockey website that has video clips, it has testimonials, it has resources. We're going to continue to hit that. I know every newsletter that goes out from USA Hockey to the coaches, to the 8U players, 10U players, 12U, to the officials, to the adults, has a link to that declaration page and continues to emphasize that particular initiative. So it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not something that's going to go away. And on the officiating side, it is part of their mandatory curriculum.
Fantastic. And as we tick here towards the top of the hour, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank our panelists. Keith, in closing, is there anything you'd like to offer or add to our audience this evening?
I don't know, we can sit here for probably another hour and watch more video and critique ourselves to death. But I think for the audience, I appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate the fact that you have the interest, whether it be a coach to learn, more and better things for your kids, and the officials out here that, that want to keep the game going, that, have the high integrity, as Matt indicated earlier, to be able to make those calls, it is a black and white book. It's a black and white game for us, wear the stripes. And, but, game management creeps into it a little bit, and there may be some gray in it, but for the most part, have the integrity to make the right call. That's what I got. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate your offer tonight.
No, that's perfect. Kenny, anything you want to add here before we wrap up?
Just kind of echo what Keith talked about. And, we did not talk about the respect part of it probably enough, but that's a huge part of it. And it's not an us versus them mentality type of thing. And we do need to remember that this is youth hockey. Even when we get to 16 and 18U tier 1, where it's considered big boy hockey and it's important, and players are playing for college scholarships potentially, but the crux of the matter, it still is a youth hockey game, and we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's something we can always remember. So as we do wrap up here, let's talk about what we've got coming up over the next few Tuesdays. So tonight we talked about the declaration. Next Tuesday, August 25th, a really important episode. We're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion. USA Hockey's executive director, Pat Kelleher, is going to be joining Matt, who's in the captain's chair next Tuesday, as well as a couple of other special guests. Then we get into a couple of nuts and bolts episodes, or meat and potatoes. Referee positioning on September 1st. I'll be back hosting that episode, and then on September 8th, we're gonna be talking about linesmaning, as we like to say. So I want to thank our panelists once again for joining us. I want to thank you in the audience for watching. Appreciate all you do for USA Hockey. We're excited to get back on the ice. I know everybody's getting going. The leaves are turning in Vermont in a couple of weeks, and for the rest of us, they won't be too far behind. So good night. Good luck with everything. Thanks for your dedication to USA Hockey, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye for now.